That took a second. Something didn't quite work right. We've updated the most recent version of OBS, and of course, like a lot of things have just broken with that. Anyway, I'm Rob Bauer, and I'm the econometrician behind BetaRank, an advanced stat system for college football. And today we're going to run through what we call the Saturday Six, which we try to do on Monday nights. We run through 6 games for the college football week. Try to give you an idea of what they're going to look like from an advanced stats perspective. The stats you're going to see today are going to come out of BetaRank. Oh my gosh, I forgot my little sheets I use. I didn't bring my notes, and I got to run over to the other table and get them in a second. But anyway, I'm excited to talk about this week. We have some really good games, even though they're a little under the radar. And like last week, there wasn't really a headline game. I think Alabama and Texas, of course, ended up being that. Texas sort of really punched above its weight expectations wise. I mean, it's entirely fair to come out of that and say that our expectations for Texas need to change considerably. We'll see if that holds up as we get more games in, and not many more. I mean, teams will start to fall into, where they're going to sit for most of the year. Teams will start to fall into that within the next 3 weeks in advanced stats. We will start to have enough data to have a much better idea. As it is, what you're going to see today is weighted. The overall team rankings are for this season. They are weighted with the projections that we had coming into this year. What you're going to see for the team, the unit level stats that we'll run through are going to be from last year, because for a lot of teams, we actually only have 1 game in against FBS competition. Next week, we'll switch them over and run through the unit level stuff and have it be for this year, and we'll have enough-ish data where it won't be too crazy to go ahead and do that. Not only will we have at least 2 games of FBS competition for every team in college football, we'll start to have like a wider web of opponent comparisons across teams as we start to sort of build out the topology that allows us to do advanced stats for college football. Anyway, and like last week, Texas and Alabama were sort of the headliners, but there were some really good games sort of below the headline, right? I mean, week 0 had the big headline games to start out the year. In week 1, or not week 0, week 1 had the big headline. Week 2 was a little, there were some really games sort of, hiding under the radar, if you will. And this week is a lot like that. So I try to run through on 5 minutes a game. I have a timer. I know. Isn't that exciting? Time yourself. But I do mostly make it. We'll see. I'll try to talk you through exactly what the advanced stats are as well as we go through. And I'll give you, a rundown of who the QB is, who the QBs are, who the offensive and defensive coordinators are, all of that. But try to give you an idea of what the teams are going to show up and try to do, and what are their advantages and disadvantages coming into this game. Anyway, I'm going to, and bear with me, like this is the kind of thing, of course, that, just happens every once in a while. Let me go run and grab the notes, and then I'll be right back. All right. Dum-ba-dum-ba-dum. So let's go ahead and hop in. There is, it's not necessarily a headline game networks wise, but there is a really good game, a little under the radar for this season, for this week anyway. Let's go ahead and hop into it. And this is it. Mississippi State at LSU. Now, look, LSU lost some shine, certainly, in their opening loss to Florida State. And a lot of this projection is built on years prior performance, as well as, how well LSU has recruited. The projection model, of course, doesn't see the coaching staff change. In comes Mississippi State under Mike Leach. LSU is under Brian Kelly, of course. Last season, LSU is at number 35 on offense. They currently sit at number 31 on offense. Mike Denbrock's your offensive coordinator currently for them. He was the offensive coordinator at Cincinnati, also prior at Notre Dame. The offense last season for LSU, they were a bit more pass heavy. I do expect them to be a little bit more run heavy in this game. They were decent at drive efficiency. Where they struggled was explosive drives. They really need to work on coming into this year, getting better at big plays. Their play efficiency number was decent. Number 37 overall, but too many 3 and outs, too many turnovers, 61 in negative drives. One thing to watch out for here, Jaden Daniels is your QB, 78.3 completion percentage, 7.5 per. He's only had one game, of course, against FBS competition, that Florida State game. He's a dangerous runner, and they're likely going to need him to run in this game, just as they did against Florida State, I think, to keep the chains moving. Other side of the football, Zach Arnett is your defensive coordinator. He runs the Rocky Long 3-3-5. They were decent last year. I mean, this isn't great. I mean, I grade out Power 5 units on a 1 to 65 scale. This is sort of shading towards the middle side of the Power 5. What they really needed to work on last season was drive efficiency. You could put together drives against Mississippi State to put up points. They did a really good job, I think, last week against Arizona, and you saw some of this, right? They were able to force some turnovers. They were able to find ways to get off the field. What they did really well last year was contain big plays, 15 in explosive drives. That's something that they're going to want to continue into this season. They currently sit at number 3 in pay to rank on defense, and you can see why we're not showing you the in-season statistics where Mississippi State does have 2 games in the books against FBS competition, but we're going to really need to see at least another game before we start relying on where those in-season stats are. Sitting at number, they've got some work to do, I think, on this side of the football. No big run pass split for them. Like I said, and if this unit and their special teams can take a bit of a step forward, I think they should be a really good team this year. On the other side of the football, they were at, Mississippi State was number 9 offensively last season. They currently sit at number 7. Mike Leach is your play caller here. Number 3 in drive efficiency. This is a little bit more like the Gardner Minshew version of the air raid that Mike Leach ran. 35 in explosive drives. They weren't as explosive. They're just a really high efficiency offense. Will Rogers does a really good job hitting his checkdowns, finding open men underneath. 54 in play efficiency. Number 8 in negative drives. I mean, not a lot of turnovers, not a lot of 3 and outs. And of course, you have a huge run pass split here. 124 in effective rush, number 2 in effective pass. LSU was actually really good last year defensively. Durante Jones was their defensive coordinator. He went back to the NFL, which I think was a bit of a miss by some college programs. Like, should have hired Durante Jones instead of letting him go back to be a position coach in the NFL. Anyway, Matt House is your new DC. He spent some time in Kentucky. He was viewed as an up-and-comer, and he was with the Chiefs when Kelly hired him in. Number 14 in drive efficiency. They did a pretty good job finding ways to get off the field last year. Now, they were a little bit more susceptible to big plays, 25 in explosive drives, 19 in play efficiency. They're at 28 in negative drives, 16 in effective rush, 15 in effective pass. No big runs pass split there. They get Will Rogers, who's completing 78.6% of his passes. And you may say, oh, that's a big number. Like, he was really high last year too. I believe around 75% overall for the entire season. 7.8 per. This is a good matchup. LSU and Mississippi State, 50% win probability here with Mississippi State on the road. It's a pick 'em as far as the model goes. I'm excited to see this. I mean, we're going to find out a lot about where this. 2 things. We're going to find out a lot about where this LSU defense is coming into this season. This is going to be a test for them. Mississippi State does have a really good offense. We're also going to find out a lot about where Mississippi State's defense is. They need to take some steps forward coming into this year. Can they slow down Jaden Daniels? And then where's the special teams? Like, it's a little bit of an adventure still for Mississippi State. They had some missed extra points against Arizona. This really hurt them last year in particular. Keep an eye on that in this game because they were horrendous last year. They needed to show improvement coming into this year to not hold back this team. This is a pretty good matchup too. I mean, this isn't quite as bad as last week. I'm probably last week was rough. So again, these are last year's unit rankings. Penn State comes in at number 12 under James Franklin. Auburn comes in at number 17. Again, a lot of that's projection. I don't know that the projection model fully handles transfers very well yet. Brian Harson's your head coach for Auburn. They were not great. I mean, for an SEC team to be sitting at 27 last season offensively isn't optimal. They struggled with drive efficiency, consistency, being able to put together, drives to put up points on the board. Some of that is play calling. They were a little bit better, 23 in explosive drives. That's a solid number comparatively. 50 in play efficiency, controlling for field position, opponent. I mean, all of these are controlling for field position and opponent, but controlling for field position and opponent as well as explosives. They didn't put up a great yards per play, but they did a really good job in negative drives, avoiding 3 and outs, avoiding turnovers. They have a new OC in. There was a lot of change on the staff, except for the head coach. Eric Kiesau is your offensive coordinator here. Auburn, it currently sits this season in the small amount of data at number 74 overall offensively. We have a really small sample. I mean, it was an adventure for them, a little bit more than you'd expect against San Jose State last week. They don't have a huge run pass split. TJ Finley's your quarterback for Auburn, 64.7% completion, 8.2 per. This is going to be a pretty stout test for them. Penn State's defense is a new DC in Manny Diaz. I was a little skeptical. I mean, he's a pretty good defensive coordinator. I don't know if he's going to put up top 10 units like Brent Pry, their former DC, regularly did in Happy Valley. But they currently sit at number 12. Last season, they were at number 8. They did a really good job at drive efficiency, really good job on explosive drives. I mean, all these numbers as you're going through are good. They found ways to avoid giving up long drives. They contained big plays. They could, and on some of these, like they could clean them up if they'd like to improve. But if you look down, you can see what the main culprit was last season. They were really good against the pass. They were less effective against the run, and that's something that they're going to have to work on coming into the season. I mean, if you remember, like where Penn State sort of did well, it was where they could lean on their pass defense. Like Ohio State struggled to run the football last season. That matchup against Penn State's defense in a lot of ways last year was a bad matchup for them because Penn State has such a good pass defense and they struggled to run the football. I'm interested to see this defense, and this is going to tell us a lot about the kind of year Auburn might have once they get into SEC play, and where this offense really is. I didn't like Kiesau the last time he called plays. It was really bad when he was at Fresno State. Other side of the football, speaking of really bad offense, so Mike Yursich is your offensive coordinator for Penn State. I'm shocked. I mean, he was a really good OC when he was at Oklahoma State. He then got to go to Ohio State and learn a very different scheme, both from Ryan Day and Urban Meyer. They struggled profoundly last season, and some of that is the injury to Sean Clifford. But they were at 70 in beta rank last year. They currently sit at 41. That's an improvement. I mean, we'll see where they shake out. We'll get a decent idea of where they are after this game. They struggled in putting together long drives to put up points, but they were really not a very explosive offense last year. Number 98 overall, 71 in play efficiency, 46 in negative drives. All of these are really bad numbers for a Power 5 unit. 35 in effective pass, 103 in effective rush. Now you should expect some of that, I think, with Yursic's background. But, early on in that Purdue game, they didn't look terribly effective throwing the football around. Of course, Clifford had that minor injury. Drew Allar came in and looked really good. But Clifford's likely your guy here. He's going to get a 60.9 completion percentage thus far in the year, 7.7 per. They're going to have to, and they like one of the, some of their freshman running backs. They're going to have to run the ball better. In comes Jeff Schmedding as your new defensive coordinator at Auburn. Last year they had Derek Mason, who was really good, who got tired of all the drama at Auburn and went off to Oklahoma State, took a pay cut to do it. But Auburn's defense last year was really good. They sit at 57 right now. We'll see where they sit after this game. Number 10 overall in beta rank. They were really good at drive efficiency. They found ways to get off the field and not give up long drives for points, but they did struggle a little bit giving up big plays, and they didn't create enough 3 and outs and turnovers. I mean, that's a big watch out for them last year. The culprit for them was the pass game. That is interesting coming in here. This is an opportunity, I think, for Penn State against this defense because they did struggle so much against the pass last year. If Clifford can get it going, and that's a bit of an if, and they did lean last year more into throwing the football. This is a decent matchup, I think, for this Penn State defense or offense. Also, Schmedding's not in Mason's league as a play caller, so this should be a decent game for Penn State. It's a 50% win probability again on the road here. I do like Penn State a little bit in this game, even though the model has it projected as a, as a toss up. This is kind of a sneaky fun game here. We've got Jeff Traylor as your head coach at UTSA. Steve Sarkisian is your head coach at Texas. We have Texas currently at number 20 overall, moving up a little bit, after what we've seen in the early season. And UTSA sits at 55, one of the better group of 5 teams. They had a really good offense last year. They have a new OC in because their old OC got hired in as the offensive coordinator at Illinois. But Texas last year struggled a little bit offensively, number 37 overall in beta rank. They faded a little bit as the season went on. They really struggled at putting up big plays, 43 in explosive drives, 60 in play efficiency. These are really not great. I mean, in particular, when you think about the talent that's available at Texas, 49 in negative drives, too many 3-and-outs, too many turnovers. Now look, Sarkisian's been one of the best when he was at Alabama, one of the best play callers in college football. Took that Alabama offense to places that it hadn't been under Lane Kiffin or Mike Locksley. But a lot of it is they're going to have to be more effective throwing the football to be able to, jailbreak out Bijan Robinson. Anyway, Hudson Card, of course, with the injury, Hudson Card's going to be playing in this game. 66.7% completion percentage, 6.7 per. They get a UTSA defense that's not great. I mean, currently Texas sits at 44 offensively, in the limited data. UTSA sits at 89 again in the limited data this season. They struggled with big plays, giving up a lot of big plays last year, 100 in explosive drives. Their negative drives number there at 78 is another watch out. Not a ton of 3-and-outs, not a ton of turnovers. They really struggled defending the pass last season. And this is, if you look at they had a pretty tight matchup against Army last week. That was a better matchup for this defense in a lot of ways because they are better defending the run than they are the pass. Army, of course, famously isn't going to beat you throwing the football. You got to get up and stop the run. This should be a decent matchup, I think, for Card and Xavier Worthy. They really need to put up some big plays here. Try to put them behind the 8 ball. But if you flip it around, and part of the reason this matchup is in here is this one right here. Is offensively UTSA was pretty good last year. I want to see this Texas defense do it again. Right, they were good last week, slowing down Alabama's offense. They were at 57 last year overall. Pete Kwiatkowski is your defensive coordinator, of course, but they've switched over to largely what is more Gary Patterson's scheme. Now, UTSA's offense currently sits at 53. I think they have a shot to improve on that. Will Stein's your offensive coordinator for them. Texas, though, at 57 last season, is sitting at number 4 right now. So I want to, like I said, I want to see it repeated, right? Do they have a letdown this week? UTSA last year, offensively, pretty good at drive efficiency. They did manage to both execute, both in play calling as well as on the field. A little less explosive, 47 in explosive drives. They did a really good job avoiding 3-and-outs, avoiding turnovers, 22 in negative drives. I mean, this is a really good group of 5 offense, this kind of a number. 35 in effective rush, 28 in effective pass. You're not really looking at a big split there. Frank Harris is back at QB, 68.2% completion percentage, 7.9 per. Texas, as we talked about, they look like they've made significant strides. So I want to, part of the reason I'm previewing this is I want to see it again, right? That's what makes this matchup interesting. It's going to tell us something about what Texas is going to be this year, I think, in particular. They were decent at drive efficiency last year, but interestingly for a Kwiatkowski defense, they really struggled with big plays. And often in the old Kwiatkowski system, you wouldn't see the 2 high safeties on the TV picture because they were quite high. But they struggled last season giving up a lot of big plays. That was a hallmark of Kwiatkowski's defenses at Washington, is they did not give up big plays. They struggled at play efficiency. They struggled with negative drives. The culprit, of course, was not the pass defense, though that wasn't great. It was the run defense. They really, really struggled stopping the run. They did a decent job last week against Bama. I think the switch is helping to the 4-2-5. and helping them contain the run game, having the safeties, I mean, at least in the picture. If you can't, I mean, the downside of that Kwiatkowski defense and that high safety look is if you can't stop the run and you're unwilling to bring those safety downs, your life can be miserable. So they've done a lot better job. I'm interested to see them in this game if they can slow down what should be a pretty good UTSA offense again. Anyway, Texas has a 79% win probability at home. We've got it at 9.5. I think it could go higher because I think it's possible that we're underrating Texas based on what we've seen. I also want to see if Texas's offense can really get on track again, against what should be a pretty pliable defense that they're going up against. I'm really excited for this game. This game will be genuine fun. So last year, Fresno State was the better team, so they end up on the left over here as we're doing these. Anyway, Jeff Tedford comes in, the return of Tedford to Fresno State. They're sitting at 48 overall. USC is also creeping up pretty quickly. They're at number 18 right now in beta rank. Lincoln Riley's your head coach. Now, Fresno State was at 52 last season offensively. That's with Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb calling plays. Jake Kaner, of course, is back off of a pretty good year last year for them. Kirby Moore is your offensive play caller here. Now, he did call plays for Fresno in the bowl game last year. He's done a pretty good job thus far. They sit at 33 currently in the in-season data. And they did play Oregon State, which doesn't have the greatest defense last week. Now, what they were good at last year was big plays. I mean, they were 29 in explosive drives. They weren't a terribly efficient offense. 88 in drive efficiency last season. That's something they have to clean up and get better at coming into this year. Their play efficiency was pretty good at 34. And again, this is a decent group of 5 defense. This is pretty good overall. Great on 1 to 65 for the Power 5. And if you find yourself as a group of 5 team in that 1 to 65, you're doing good things. But they have a huge run pass split. I mean, what you're going to get. That's part of why I want to see this, because USC's defense kind of sucked last week against Stanford. And they didn't look that great at times against Rice either. And I don't want to hear it about the turnovers. I had to listen last season to people that ostensibly know things about football saying Iowa's defense can continue this, continue this rate of turnovers indefinitely. And of course they didn't. And of course they can't. USC's defense last season really struggled. Now, they currently sit at 41 overall at beta rank. We're going to find out a lot more about them this week and find out where they're going to sit. Because last week, not only could Stanford throw the ball a bit against them, but Stanford could run against them. And Stanford hasn't been able to really run the ball against anyone in a long time. They were struggled with drive efficiency, in particular, 102 in explosive drives. I mean, the big thing to watch out for with this defense, and the reason I'm highlighting this game, and again, is because I want to see Haener's a really good QB. They are going to look to get yards through the air, where USC struggled in particular last year. I mean, their rush defense wasn't good. We got an example that maybe the rush defense wasn't good last week, continuing into this year. I want to see where the pass defense is. They were really bad defending the pass last year, 119 in effective pass. Obviously, Fresno State's going to come in and rely on Haener. They're going to look to throw the football. What does USC have here? As we look to see what they're going to be like into conference play, because all of a sudden with Notre Dame looking mortal, it might just come down to how close is USC to Utah as we get into this. And are they going to be good enough to make it through without, having to, if they end up -3 on turnovers in a game, are they going to be good enough to win? The defense is the one that's going to largely determine that, because the offense looks just incredible. So Lincoln Riley's your play caller offensively. They were at 40 last season under Graham Harrell. Of course, practically a line change, practically all new receivers, new quarterback, new offensive line coach. Lots of new shiny toys. They struggled in drive efficiency last year with execution. They were a little bit better at explosive drives and negative drives. They certainly threw the ball. They're going to look to likely throw the football quite a bit again. When one does have Jordan Addison, Caleb Williams, you're going to throw it around. They were at 40 last season. They sit at number 9 currently. One more week's worth of data is going to really help us place where USC is going to fall. I think they really are likely a top 10 offense this season. That's really exciting to see. Fresno State's defense under William Inge last season was sneaky good, particularly for a group of 5 unit. What they excelled at was drive efficiency. So they used the field to their advantage. They had a pretty good offense by group of 5 standards. They often had good field position. They used that to find ways to eventually get off the field. They did give up some big plays, 76 and explosive drives. They were a little bit better against the run than they were against the pass. Look, I mean, the USC is likely going to be able to score almost at will against this game. That might put Fresno into a bind where they're making mistakes, trying to play catch up. But I think overall, the answers are going to come not again if USC magically forces a bunch of turnovers, they get the turnover luck going again. That could possibly happen. The answer is going to be does USC give up a bunch of yards again? I mean, that's going to kill you. Stanford should have put up a lot more points against USC than they did last week. It was largely just boneheaded mistakes and bad luck that kept them from doing it. Man, you better not be counting on your opponents doing that all the time. Anyway, this should be a fun one. I'm excited to see where this USC defense is again. These are the kinds of things when we talk about USC, when we talk about Texas, right? Who's going to challenge, as we get into conference play. Two weeks in a row, previewing Texas Tech. Congratulations, Lubbock. That's about the nicest thing I've ever done for Lubbock or said about Lubbock. Anyway, we get in Texas Tech visiting at NC State. This is a pretty interesting game, I think, for a cross-conference, for a non-conference game. NC State does feel like they're poking along a little bit. They were at 50, Dave Doran's your head coach. Joey McGuire's your head coach for Texas Tech. NC State offensively struggled a little bit last season. Tim Beck's your offensive coordinator. He was the OC under Tom Herman at Texas. And you did see something like this split. They did put up explosive plays when he was with Texas. But they were better at drive efficiency. This is what's sort of quixotic for me is I wasn't expecting Tim Beck to lean in this much. I mean, Phil Longo runs an offense that's a lot like this. I mean, it's a lot of home runs. It's a lot of explosive plays. And they are a little less efficient. But I mean, I say they're considerably less efficient than they are explosive, but not into this range. I mean, NC State's not as explosive as they need to be. They're also way worse at drive efficiency. They need to be a lot more consistent, both in play calling and in execution. They had a pretty big run pass split last year. Devin Leary's your QB. He's at 56.9% completion percentage thus far on the season. That is not going to get it done in modern college football, my friends. A QB sub 60% completion percentage is bad, right? Is either something's wrong with the offense and the wide receivers or something's wrong with the quarterback. They had 7.7 per. They currently sit at 103. I mean, that's part of why. I mean, I don't think they're really going to be at 103 over the entire season, but they haven't been good. They have a lot to clean up. They get a Texas Tech defense that looked pretty good last week against a Houston offense that honestly, the Houston defense under Doug Belk is the sneaky good unit for them. But we did expect with Clayton Tune and Holgerson for them to take a little bit of a step forward. But anyway, Tim DeRuyter is your defensive coordinator here. I think he has largely improved what was a horrendous unit last season. What they struggled with last year was drive efficiency. You could put together drives against this Texas Tech defense last year. They were considerably better at not giving up big plays. They still gave up some big plays. No big run pass split. They currently sit at 34. I don't know if that's necessarily sustainable. However, anything that they get below 70 is a massive improvement over last year and tip you the cap for that kind of a turnaround, right? This should be an interesting matchup of one unit that seems to be very much on the rise and the other unit that is either treading water or going down. And this is going to tell us a lot about whether NC State's going to challenge in what should be a really wide open ACC that nobody appears to want to take a really big step forward in at the moment. Offensively you flip this around. This is where NC State might be able to just rely on a rock solid defense. Texas Tech's offense, they do have a new offensive coordinator in. Zach Kitley's your new OC. They are running the air raid. Now they were a lot more explosive last season. They were at 24 in explosive drives. They did struggle a little bit. They need to get a little bit better at their drive efficiency number. They were good at play efficiency. That's the least important of the core four beta rank metrics. It's much better to put up big plays, put up long drives, not take 3 and outs, not turn the ball over than it is to put up a really good yards per play. But every little bit helps, right? They were much better throwing the ball than they were running the ball. Largely, you should expect that to continue. Now, Tyler Shuck got injured. I don't think he's their best quarterback. He seems to keep winning the job in training camp. I think Donovan Smith is their best quarterback. And so he's going to be playing in this game. 67.6 per completion percentage, 7.7 per. They get an NC State defense under Tony Gibson that's really good. Like Tony Gibson's a guy that's either headed for a bigger job as a DC or headed for a head coaching job in the group of 5. He's consistently, both when he was at West Virginia and now at NC State, been a really, really good defensive coordinator. Number 13 overall, they sit at number 13 currently this season as well in the data. That's not unsurprising. We expected them to be good. Nothing stands out. They were pretty good at just about everything. Drive efficiency, explosive drives. There was no obvious way to beat them. They were better though against the pass last season than they were against the run. That's a real positive heading into, when you're going to play Texas Tech, a team that's going to look to throw the ball to beat you. We've got NC State with a 70. What did I write that as? Is that a 74? 74. My handwriting's so bad. 74% win probability, completion percentage, win probability, 7.78, favored in the game for NC State. This will be a fun one. It's going to tell us a lot about NC State, and Texas Tech. They've got it with playing Houston. They have a fairly interesting non-conference counting in the this game. They're going to help us quite a bit in being able to measure where some of these teams are at the end of the year. This one's a fun one because Michigan's beta rank did not think Michigan State was that good last year. I thought they were pretty darn lucky. The beta rank pretty much had Michigan State as much more the team that got absolutely boat raced in Columbus than the team that had some pretty fortuitous turnovers in their other big games. Michigan State, Mel Tucker's your head coach. Kalen DeBoer is in his first year at Washington as the head coach. Michigan State comes in. They were at 39 offensively last year. Jay Johnson's your offensive coordinator for them. I don't think he's a great OC. I'm not sure in the long run he's going to be the guy that Mel Tucker relies on, but he brought him with him from Colorado. They coached on the same staff together before when they were at Georgia. They were 18 in drive efficiency. They did a pretty good job being able to put together drives to put up points, but they struggled putting up big plays last year. Their play efficiency number was pretty good, but man, a lot of turnovers, a lot of 3 and outs for them last year. They have a lot to work on offensively. A little bit better throwing the ball than they were running the ball. They currently sit at number 50 overall. This game's going to be a good measuring stick for them. They haven't really played anyone yet. Of course, neither is Washington. So we're going to find out a lot about these teams coming in out of this game anyway. Unless it's like that Wisconsin Washington State game, which is just slightly organized chaos on a football field. Washington last season defensively was a really interesting defense. They struggled compared to where they had been. They had consistently been a top 10 defense, both under Chris Peterson and Jimmy Lake's first season. His first season was a little wonky in the data. 2020 data was out there. 75 in drive efficiency. You could absolutely put the other long drives on Washington last season. They currently sit at number 95. We're going to find out. They only have one game against FBS data in there, and it was against Kent State. We're going to find out a lot more about them in this game, what they're able to do. They've moved to a new scheme with Injin as your defensive coordinator. Like I said, he did a pretty good job running that Fresno State defense. I largely expect him to do a pretty good job here. But they did a really good job last year containing big plays. That defense that they ran last season excelled at that. As you can see though, and what I want to call out and emphasize here in particular was one is they didn't force enough 3 and outs and turnovers, number 43 in negative drives. That's a number to clean up. I think largely they can clean up their drive efficiency number though by cleaning up their run defense. And that's been, and I think with Inge is the interesting thing to look at, and what you're going to have to see here in this game is last year you could run A and B gap against Washington all day. They kept their safeties high regardless. They just got, I mean, if you remember that Michigan game, Michigan just ran it down their throat again and again and again. And largely you could do that. And nearly everyone did last year. I was always shocked when I would turn on a Washington game and their defense was on the field and you were not running A and B gap because they couldn't stop you. That defense that they had last season, you really need a Vita Vea type, mauler to play 2 gap. Their new system is a true 4-man front. They're, I think they're leaning into more of the personnel that they have and what they can recruit to, and not having to rely on having a superstar defensive tackle, in the hopper ready to go. I'm interested to see where they are this season in particular. That's going to tell us a lot about where Washington is in competing within the Pac-12, which is still, it's not that, Utah is probably the best team in the conference, but it's still fairly wide open and interesting in a lot of ways. And they don't get USC on the schedule this season. Offensively, of course, under John Donovan last year, this was the real problem. They were awful. Currently, they sit at so Kalen DeBoer is here. Michael Penix is here. A bunch of other transfers are here. I should have called out Peyton Thorne for Michigan State, 57.7 per, and they've played some really bad competition, 8.6 per completion. I'm interested to see what he's got against. Washington had some losses in the secondary, but the coaching and development's been so good for them for that unit in particular. Offensively, Washington, this is a totally different animal. It's almost like throw these stats out, but I unfortunately have only one game against FBS competition thus far to say like throw the stats out. So Washington last season, they did a really good job with drive efficiency. I would expect like what we talked about with Fresno State's offense last year under Ryan Grubb. Washington's a little bit more leaning towards explosive plays than they have been in the past. Like DeBoer and Grubb with Penix at QB are going to look to hit some big plays. They do like to run the football a little bit as well. It's not just rely on Penix to throw it around. Michael Penix right now is completing 69.7% of his passes, 10.3 per. The wide receivers have looked pretty good. Again, we've only seen them against Kent State and an FCS team. So mileage may vary. This should be a fun matchup though, because Scotty Hazelton, the defensive coordinator for Michigan State's a pretty good DC. Came out of Wyoming, then went to Kansas State. Had really good defenses in both places. I'm already over my time. But last season they struggled a bit. They were good at drive efficiency. They found ways to use the field to their advantage and get off the field, but they struggled. Not enough. They gave up a lot of big plays. Some of that, of course, was that thrashing that the Buckeyes gave them. But play efficiency wasn't great either. Now, they did force some timely turnovers, but they didn't force a lot of 3-and-outs last season. They currently sit at number 55 overall defensively. I do expect them to get better. I have a lot of faith in what Scotty Hazelton is going to do as a DC. I thought that was a really good hire by Mel Tucker. Now, you could absolutely throw, some of this is they got absolutely torched by the Buckeyes, but you could throw against Michigan State. That's a bit of a watch out coming into this game. They need to be a lot better defending the pass than they were last season. This is going to be a real test for this defense where they are, because I actually think Washington can throw the football. I think Penix, Nick Sheridan is on this Washington staff. Oddly enough, he used to coach with DeBoer at Indiana. But he's not the play caller, and he was a really bad offensive coordinator, and that's fine, right? Like he's a decent position coach. Not everybody's cut out to be an OC or a DC. As long as Nick Sheridan's not calling plays, Michael Penix is good, and largely very good. I'm excited to see this matchup. We've got a Washington. I think this is a pick 'em in Vegas. Or maybe Washington by 3. It's Washington 70%, 6.34 favored by. So that's week 3. Look, there's some pretty good games. We didn't even cover Oregon and BYU. That's going to be a really fun game at Autzen. Of course, Oregon is coming off just getting absolutely spanked by Georgia. They had a tune-up last week against an FCS team, and now they get a good BYU team. A BYU team that I think people are overselling how much the defense has improved. I'm not expecting much out of this BYU defense. They were awful last season. And it should give oh God, I'm forgetting his name now. How embarrassing is that? He was the Auburn quarterback. Bo Nix. Should give Bo Nix and Co. an opportunity to be able to put up some plays. But the big thing here is BYU had a legit top 10 offense last season. Jaron Hall is really, really good. I thought Baylor, who has, of course, Dave Aranda and Ron Roberts on staff. They put together a really good defensive game plan to be able to slow down BYU last week. But this should be a really good matchup here. And we're going to find out where exactly Dan Lanning has this defense, because they got worked by Georgia. We've only got to see them otherwise against an FCS team. Are they going to be able to slow down Hall, who can really sling it? I mean, really, like, he's a legitimately good quarterback throwing the football. But the thing is like, when they need yards sometimes, I mean, he is lightning fast. He is a really, really dangerous threat running the football, even though he doesn't do it a ton. And in a lot of ways, I think he's a lot better quarterback than Zach Wilson. So that's week 3. Next week, we'll switch over. I'll commit to that. I mean, unless the data is unless I look at the data, it's still wonky. I mean, so let me caveat that. But I'd like to be next week. I'm going to plan on, and my preference is going to be towards the in-season data when we get into the matchups. It should be settled enough that we can start to draw some conclusions from it and look at it, and it's not just like a wild finger in the wind. Like I said, like for a lot of these teams that we only have one FBS game in thus far this season, that limits the level of comparison we have. After this week, we'll start to build out far more of like, not only do we have 2 games in for each team, but we're going to have all of the other games connected to those games as well that we've seen for comparison purposes. So that's pretty exciting. I'm excited to get into it. I'll update Beta Rank again on Sunday morning. Usually have it up by 9. You can find everything at sharpcollegefootball.com. And let's do that. Let's do the finish. So you can find everything you just saw and a whole lot more at sharpcollegefootball.com. I'm Rob Bowen, the econometrician chicken behind Beta Rank. You can find me at Beta Rank FB or at Sharp College Football. We have a Pac-12 podcast at 12 Pack Radio. And you can find all the back episodes of that at sharpcollegefootball.com/12 Pack Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we'll see you again for the Saturday 6 next Monday.